In 1988, the most advanced scientific laboratories in the world delivered a verdict that shook Christianity to its core. The Shroud of Turin, believed by millions to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ, was declared a medieval fake, created between 1260 and 1390 AD. Case closed. Mystery solved. Faith defeated by science. Except that's not where the story ends. It's where the story gets truly terrifying. Because in the decades since that damning verdict, new evidence has emerged that suggests the carbon dating was wrong. Forensic analysis has revealed details about crucifixion that medieval forgers couldn't have known. And image analysis has uncovered properties that modern science still cannot explain or reproduce. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the Shroud of Turin represents the ultimate battle between science and faith, and why both sides are desperately afraid of what the truth might reveal. But first, if mysteries that challenge the very foundations of belief fascinate you, hit that subscribe button. This is going to be a journey that will leave you questioning everything. The Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy. Behind bulletproof glass and climate-controlled atmosphere lies what might be the most controversial piece of cloth in human history. 14 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, woven from linen in a herringbone pattern. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than an ancient burial shroud, stained with age and marked by fire damage. But look closer, much closer. Faintly visible on the fabric is the image of a man. Not painted, not drawn, but somehow burned into the very fibers of the cloth. A man who was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, around 175 pounds, with shoulder-length hair and a beard. A man who bears the unmistakable marks of Roman crucifixion. This is the Shroud of Turin, and for over 500 years, it has been revered as the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ. The Catholic Church has never officially declared it authentic, but millions of believers consider it the most sacred relic in Christianity. The problem is that science says it's impossible. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories used radiocarbon dating to determine the age of the shroud. Their unanimous conclusion: the cloth was created sometime between 1260 and 1390 AD, over 1,200 years after the crucifixion of Christ. But here's where the story takes a dark turn, because the more scientists study the shroud, the more impossible it becomes to explain, whether it's authentic or fake. If you're ready to dive into one of history's most controversial mysteries where cutting-edge science meets ancient faith, show some love with a like. Trust me, you've never seen evidence like what we're about to explore. To understand why the Shroud of Turin is so controversial, we need to examine what makes the image so extraordinary and so scientifically baffling. In 1898, Italian photographer Secondo Pia became the first person to photograph the shroud. When he developed the plates in his darkroom, he made a discovery that changed everything. The image on the shroud is a photographic negative. When Pia's camera captured the negative image, it revealed a positive, a clear, detailed portrait of a crucified man that was invisible to the naked eye. Think about what this means. Photography wasn't invented until the 1820s. The concept of photographic negatives didn't exist until the 19th century. Yet somehow, a medieval forger supposedly created a perfect photographic negative 500 years before anyone understood what a photographic negative was. But that's just the beginning of the impossibilities. Modern image analysis has revealed that the shroud contains three-dimensional information encoded within its two-dimensional surface. When scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory processed the image through their VP-8 image analyzer technology originally designed for analyzing satellite photos, they discovered something unprecedented. The intensity of the image correlates directly with the distance the cloth would have been from the body. Areas where the cloth touched the body show darker impressions. Areas where the cloth was farther away show lighter impressions. This creates a perfect three-dimensional map of a human form. No painting, photograph, or artistic technique known to medieval craftsmen could have produced this effect. Even modern artists, using contemporary technology, struggle to create images with this level of three-dimensional encoding. Dr. John Jackson, physicist and Shroud researcher, put it bluntly, "I can think of no explanation for how this image was formed other than some kind of radiant energy emanating from the body itself." If the shroud is a medieval forgery, then whoever created it possessed knowledge about crucifixion that wouldn't be discovered by modern science until the 20th century. Dr. Pierre Barbet, a French surgeon, spent decades analyzing the wounds visible on the shroud. What he found challenges everything we thought we knew about medieval knowledge of human anatomy. The nail wounds are positioned through the wrists, not the palms as depicted in medieval art. For centuries, Christian artwork showed Christ crucified with nails through his palms. But anatomical studies prove that nails through the palms cannot support body weight. The flesh would tear, and the body would fall. The Romans drove nails through the wrists between the radius and ulna bones, where the structure could support a crucified person's weight. This knowledge was lost to history and only rediscovered through modern forensic studies of crucifixion. Yet somehow, the shroud shows the anatomically correct placement of crucifixion nails, knowledge that medieval forgers supposedly didn't possess. But the forensic evidence gets even more disturbing. The blood patterns on the shroud match exactly what forensic scientists would expect from a crucified victim. The blood flows are gravitationally correct for someone hanging vertically, then lying horizontally. The blood has separated into red blood cells and serum, creating the distinct patterns that only occur in real blood samples. Here's what I want you to think about. If medieval forgers had enough anatomical knowledge to fake these details correctly, why did every piece of medieval crucifixion art get them wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This contradiction is at the heart of the entire mystery. Dr. Robert Buckland, a forensic pathologist who examined the shroud, concluded, "The wounds are entirely consistent with crucifixion. The blood patterns are correct. The anatomical proportions are accurate. If this is a forgery, it was created by someone with extensive knowledge of forensic pathology, human anatomy, and the specific details of Roman crucifixion techniques. Knowledge that supposedly didn't exist in medieval Europe." 1988. The Vatican finally agreed to allow scientific testing of the shroud. 3 laboratories, Oxford University, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, were given samples of the cloth for radiocarbon dating. Their conclusion was unanimous and devastating. The shroud was created between 1260 and 1390 AD, making it a medieval forgery. Case closed. The scientific method had spoken. The Shroud of Turin was definitively proven to be a fake. Except that's not what actually happened. Dr. Raymond Rogers, a chemist who participated in the original testing, later made a discovery that changed everything. The samples used for carbon dating weren't representative of the original shroud fabric. Rogers found that the tested samples contained cotton fibers and chemical treatments that weren't present in the main body of the shroud. The samples had been taken from areas that had been rewoven during medieval repairs, not from the original 1st century linen. Think about what this means. The most important scientific test in the shroud's history was conducted on medieval repair patches, not on the original cloth. It's like carbon dating a restored painting and concluding that the entire artwork is modern because the restoration materials are recent. But here's where the story gets truly dark. Rogers discovered evidence that the sample locations had been deliberately selected from areas of medieval repair work. Someone involved in the testing process knew that these weren't representative samples. Whether through incompetence or intention, the most definitive scientific analysis of the shroud was fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Rogers published his findings in a peer-reviewed journal, conclusively proving that the 1988 carbon dating was invalid. But by then, the damage was done. The public narrative was established. Science had proven the shroud was fake. Rogers died in 2005, shortly after publishing his research. His findings have been largely ignored by mainstream media and dismissed by skeptical researchers who prefer the simplicity of the original medieval forgery narrative. The Catholic Church's relationship with the Shroud of Turin reveals something disturbing about institutional power, scientific truth, and the control of narrative. Officially, the Vatican has never declared the shroud authentic. They refer to it as an icon of faith rather than a genuine relic. This careful language allows the Church to benefit from the shroud's spiritual power while avoiding the scientific controversy. But behind the scenes, the Church has consistently acted to limit scientific investigation of the shroud. Access is restricted, testing is limited, and researchers who reach inconvenient conclusions find their access mysteriously revoked. Why would the Church restrict scientific analysis if they truly believed the shroud was authentic? Why limit research that could prove the most important relic in Christianity is genuine? The answer reveals the Church's deepest fear. Not that the shroud might be proven fake, but that it might be proven real. That if scientific analysis definitively proved the shroud's authenticity, it would revolutionize Christianity. It would provide physical evidence of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. It would validate core Christian beliefs through empirical science. But it would also raise terrifying questions that the Church isn't prepared to answer. If the shroud is real, how is the image formed? The image shows no signs of decomposition, suggesting the body was removed from the cloth within 36 hours. The image appears to have been created by some kind of energy burst, something that burned the image into the cloth from within. This evidence would support the Christian belief in resurrection, but it would also suggest that the resurrection involved some kind of physical, measurable phenomenon. It would make the miraculous scientific and the scientific miraculous. The Church prefers faith over proof. Definitive evidence would eliminate the need for faith, fundamentally changing the nature of religious belief. So the Vatican maintains its careful balance, treating the shroud as sacred while avoiding scientific certainty. They benefit from its spiritual power while avoiding its dangerous implications. Despite institutional resistance, independent researchers have continued studying the shroud, and their discoveries have only deepened the mystery. In 2009, Italian scientist Paolo Di Lazzaro attempted to reproduce the shroud image using modern laser technology. His team used excimer lasers, some of the most powerful light sources available, to burn images into linen cloth. The results were remarkable and terrifying. Di Lazzaro's team could reproduce some characteristics of the shroud image, but only by using laser pulses lasting just 40 billionths of a second, with power equivalent to 34 billion watts. Think about what this means. To create an image like the shroud using modern technology requires power levels that are almost incomprehensible. The energy needed would be equivalent to the output of several nuclear power plants focused into a space the size of a human body. But even with this incredible technology, Di Lazzaro couldn't fully reproduce the shroud's properties. The three-dimensional encoding, the photographic negative effect, and the specific coloration of the fibers remained beyond modern replication, Di Lazzaro concluded. At the present time, science is not able to explain how the body image was impressed on the shroud. Meanwhile, textile experts have identified characteristics of the shroud's weave that are consistent with first-century Palestinian linen. Pollen analysis has found microscopic evidence of plants native to the Jerusalem area. Limestone particles embedded in the cloth match the specific geology of ancient Jerusalem tombs. Dr. Alan Wanger, a physician and image analyst, compared the shroud to the Sudarium of Oviedo, another cloth believed to have covered Christ's head. Despite being housed in different locations for over a millennium, the two cloths show identical blood patterns and facial impressions. The probability of this being coincidental is essentially zero. Here's what I find most disturbing. Every scientific test designed to prove the shroud is fake has instead revealed evidence that supports its authenticity. What do you think this pattern suggests about the relationship between science and faith? Share your thoughts in the comments. The most disturbing aspect of the shroud controversy isn't the scientific evidence. It's the systematic suppression of research that challenges the preferred narrative. Dr. Raymond Rogers wasn't the only scientist to face institutional resistance. Dr. John Jackson, who discovered the three-dimensional properties of the shroud image, found his research funding mysteriously cut after his findings became public. Dr. Barry Schwartz, the official photographer for the Shroud of Turin research project, has faced decades of academic ostracism for defending the cloth's authenticity. Meanwhile, researchers who support the medieval forgery theory receive consistent funding, media attention, and academic support, regardless of the quality of their research or the validity of their conclusions. This isn't science. This is narrative control. The 1988 carbon dating results have been cited thousands of times in academic papers, despite being conclusively proven invalid by Rogers' subsequent analysis. Meanwhile, Rogers' peer-reviewed research debunking the carbon dating has been largely ignored by mainstream media and academic institutions. Why would the scientific community resist evidence that challenges their conclusions? Because the Shroud of Turin represents something more dangerous than a religious relic. It represents the possibility that materialist science doesn't have all the answers. If the shroud is authentic, it suggests that reality contains phenomena that current scientific paradigms cannot explain. It implies that consciousness, life, and death involve processes that transcend purely physical explanations. The scientific establishment has built its authority on the assumption that everything can be explained through materialist reductionism. The shroud challenges this assumption at its core. But perhaps most terrifying of all is the possibility that both sides are wrong. What if the shroud isn't a medieval forgery, but it's also not the burial cloth of Christ? What if it's evidence of something else entirely, something that neither science nor religion is prepared to acknowledge? What if the shroud represents evidence of phenomena that our current understanding of reality simply cannot accommodate? After decades of scientific analysis, we're left with an impossible conclusion. The Shroud of Turin shouldn't exist. If it's a forgery, it's a forgery that demonstrates knowledge and capabilities that medieval craftsmen didn't possess. If it's authentic evidence of a phenomenon that modern science cannot explain or reproduce. The image formation process remains completely mysterious. The anatomical accuracy defies medieval knowledge. The three-dimensional encoding transcends artistic technique. The photographic negative properties predate photography by centuries. Yet the carbon dating, flawed though it was, suggests medieval origins. The historical record shows no clear provenance before the 14th century. No contemporary accounts describe the cloth's discovery or early veneration. Perhaps the real truth is more complex than either side wants to admit. Perhaps the shroud represents something that challenges both religious orthodoxy and scientific materialism. What if the shroud is evidence that consciousness itself can affect physical reality in ways we don't understand? What if intense belief, trauma, or spiritual experience can leave physical traces that transcend normal causation? What if the shroud proves that the line between mind and matter, between consciousness and physical reality, is far more permeable than we've been taught to believe? These are the questions that neither the church nor the scientific establishment wants to confront. Because if the shroud teaches us anything, it's that reality might be far stranger, more mysterious, and more dangerous than either faith or science is prepared to acknowledge. Standing before the Shroud today, protected behind bulletproof glass and climate-controlled atmosphere, one can't help but feel that we're looking at evidence of something that our current understanding of reality simply cannot accommodate. Something that challenges every assumption we hold about the nature of existence itself. The Shroud of Turin remains what it has always been, an impossible object that forces us to confront the limits of both scientific knowledge and religious faith. Whether you believe it's the burial cloth of Christ or the most sophisticated forgery in history, the Shroud challenges our most basic assumptions about what's possible. It suggests that reality might contain phenomena that transcend our current understanding of physics, consciousness, and the relationship between mind and matter. Perhaps that's why both science and religion are so uncomfortable with the Shroud. It doesn't fit neatly into either materialist or theological explanations. It exists in the liminal space between the known and unknown, between the possible and impossible. The Shroud of Turin teaches us that some mysteries might be too profound for our current level of understanding. And sometimes, the most important truth isn't the answer, it's the recognition that we're asking the wrong questions entirely. If this deep dive into one of history's most controversial mysteries has challenged your assumptions about science and faith, smash that like button and subscribe for more investigations into the impossible. And here's my question for you. Do you think some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved? Or should we keep pushing the boundaries of scientific investigation regardless of what we might discover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of philosophical debate that reveals how we understand the nature of truth itself. Next week, we're exploring another impossible artifact that challenges everything we know about ancient capabilities. The precision stone cutting of Pumapunku megalithic construction so perfect that modern engineers can't understand how it was achieved. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, the most profound mysteries might be the ones that force us to question not just what we know, but how we know it.